Beneath 2 miles of solid ice lies a continent larger than the United States and Mexico combined, wrapped in darkness and mystery that has persisted for millions of years, Antarctica. A place so hostile that it kills unprepared visitors foot there than have walked on the moon. But in minutes, so remote that fewer people have said, what if this frozen wasteland isn't as empty as we've been told? What if the ice isn't hiding barren rock and snow, but something far more extraordinary? I know what you're thinking. This sounds like science fiction, like something out of a movie or a pulp novel. But here's the thing that'll make your skin crawl with possibility. We've only explored about 1% of what lies beneath Antarctica's ice sheet. 1%. That means there's an entire continent down there, roughly the size of Australia, that remains completely unknown to us. And the few glimpses we've caught through radar and satellite imagery have revealed things that don't match what we expected to find. Before we dive deeper into this frozen rabbit hole, let me tell you why this matters more than you might think. If ancient cities do exist under Antarctica's ice, we're not just talking about rewriting history textbooks. We're talking about fundamentally changing our understanding of human civilization, of how long we've been on this planet as an advanced species, and of what cataclysmic events might have buried entire civilizations under miles of ice. The implications are staggering, and they reach into every aspect of how we see ourselves and our place in the world. Now, I've spent months diving into this mystery, combing through satellite data, archaeological reports, geological surveys, and some documents that probably shouldn't be public. What I found will challenge everything you thought you knew about our planet's history. We're going to explore evidence that suggests Antarctica wasn't always the frozen wasteland it is today, examine the strange anomalies that satellites have detected beneath the ice, and look at historical accounts that might not be as fictional as we've been taught. But let's start with something that'll grab your attention immediately. In 2001, a team of researchers using ground-penetrating radar made a discovery in East Antarctica that they initially couldn't explain. Buried beneath nearly 2 miles of ice, they detected what appeared to be geometric structures. Not natural rock formations, not random ice formations, but organized, angular shapes that followed patterns too precise to be accidental. The official reports called them unusual subsurface anomalies. But when you look at the radar imagery, when you see those perfectly straight lines and right angles, you start to wonder what they're really looking at. The team kept their findings quiet for years, publishing only the most basic details in obscure geological journals. When pressed for more information, they cited concerns about premature speculation and the need for additional verification. Translation? They found something that didn't fit the accepted narrative of Antarctica's history, and they weren't sure how to handle it. This pattern of discovery followed by silence isn't unique to that 2001 expedition. Time and time again, research teams have reported finding anomalies beneath the ice that suggest human-made structures, only to have their findings buried in academic red tape or dismissed as natural formations. It's as if there's an unspoken agreement to avoid asking the uncomfortable questions that these discoveries raise. But here's where it gets really interesting. Antarctica hasn't always been the frozen continent we know today. This is established scientific fact, not speculation. Millions of years ago, Antarctica was positioned differently on the globe, enjoying a temperate climate that supported lush forests and diverse ecosystems. We know this because we found fossilized remains of tropical plants and animals embedded in Antarctic rock. The continent was warm, habitable, and potentially perfect for supporting advanced civilizations. Now, most scientists will tell you that Antarctica began its journey to the South Pole about 35 million years ago, gradually cooling as it moved into its current position. But there's growing evidence that this process wasn't as gradual as we've been taught. Some geological indicators suggest that Antarctica's climate changed much more rapidly and much more recently than the official timeline indicates. We're talking about dramatic shifts that could have flash-frozen entire civilizations in place, preserving them under rapidly accumulating ice. Think about what this means. If human civilizations existed on Antarctica when it was still warm and habitable, and if the continent's climate changed rapidly enough to catch these civilizations off guard, then we could be looking at entire cities frozen in time, not ruins weathered by millennia of exposure, but perfectly preserved snapshots of ancient life, locked away under ice like insects trapped in amber. The radar anomalies I mentioned earlier start to make a lot more sense when viewed through this lens. Those geometric patterns, those two perfect straight lines and right angles, could be the outlines of buildings, streets, and infrastructure that were flash frozen during a catastrophic climate shift. The ice didn't gradually cover and erode these structures over millions of years. It buried them quickly, preserving their original forms. But let's talk about something even more intriguing. The historical record contains numerous references to southern lands that don't match our current understanding of Antarctica's history. Ancient maps, some dating back thousands of years, show detailed coastlines of southern continents in positions that seem impossible, given what we know about ice coverage and sea levels. The most famous of these is the Piri Reis map from 1513, which appears to show the coastline of Antarctica as it would look without its ice sheet. Now, conventional historians explain these maps as artistic license or copying errors from earlier, more accurate sources. But what if they're not errors at all? What if these ancient cartographers had access to information about Antarctica from a time when it was actually habitable and mapped by people who live there? The rabbit hole goes even deeper when you start looking at the technological capabilities that would be required to create accurate maps of ice-free Antarctica. We're talking about surveying and mapping techniques that shouldn't have existed in the ancient world, at least according to our current understanding of technological development. Either these ancient civilizations had access to advanced surveying technology, or they were copying from sources created by civilizations that did. Recent satellite imagery has added fuel to this fire. High-resolution scans of the Antarctic ice sheet have revealed what appear to be organized structures beneath the surface. These aren't the random chaos of natural rock formations, but ordered patterns that suggest planning and construction. Linear features that stretch for miles in perfectly straight lines. Circular formations with too precise geometry to be natural. Grid patterns that look suspiciously like city layouts when viewed from above. The most compelling of these discoveries was made just 3 years ago by a team of researchers using advanced ground-penetrating radar systems. Deep beneath the ice in Queen Maud Land, they detected what can only be described as a massive complex of interconnected chambers and corridors. The structure spans an area roughly the size of Manhattan and shows evidence of multiple levels extending deep into the bedrock. The geometry is too precise, too organized to be anything but artificial. When the team attempted to publish their findings, they encountered pushback from multiple sources. Funding for follow-up expeditions was mysteriously cut. Academic journals rejected their papers, citing insufficient peer review. Government agencies that had initially supported the research suddenly classified the findings as sensitive. The message was clear. Some discoveries are too dangerous to share with the public. This brings us to one of the most unsettling aspects of the Antarctica mystery. The international treaties that govern research on the continent are unlike anything else in the world. The Antarctic Treaty System doesn't just regulate scientific research and environmental protection. It includes provisions for controlling information flow and limiting access to certain areas. Entire regions of the continent are off-limits to researchers, designated as protected zones with no clear explanation of what they're protecting. Why would you need to restrict access to barren ice and rock? What could possibly be so sensitive about geological formations that governments around the world would agree to keep them secret? Unless, of course, those formations aren't geological at all. The more you dig into Antarctica's mysteries, the more questions emerge. Why do satellite images of certain Antarctic regions get routinely censored or blurred out? Why do researchers who venture too far from established bases sometimes return with stories they're instructed never to repeat? Why do some of the world's most powerful people make regular, unexplained trips to a continent that officially has nothing to offer but scientific research opportunities? These aren't conspiracy theories or wild speculation. These are documented patterns of behavior that suggest something significant is being hidden beneath Antarctica's ice. Something important enough to justify decades of secrecy, international cooperation, and substantial financial investment in keeping the public from learning the truth. But here's what really makes this story compelling. The evidence isn't just circumstantial anymore. We have radar imagery, satellite data, and geological surveys that all point to the same conclusion. They're artificial structures beneath Antarctica's ice sheet. Structures that predate any known human civilization, yet show signs of advanced engineering and planning that rivals or exceeds our current capabilities. What we're looking at isn't just the possibility of ancient cities beneath the ice. We're looking at evidence of a lost chapter of human history, a civilization that achieved remarkable technological and architectural feats before being buried by one of the most dramatic climate shifts in Earth's history. A civilization whose existence challenges everything we think we know about the development of human society and our place in the timeline of planetary history. The implications stretch far beyond archaeology and history. If advanced civilizations existed on Antarctica millions of years before our accepted timeline of human development, then we need to reconsider our understanding of human evolution, technological progress, and the stability of Earth's climate systems. We need to ask uncomfortable questions about what other civilizations might have risen and fallen before our current historical record begins. And we need to wonder what knowledge, what technologies, what insights into human potential might be preserved in those frozen cities, waiting beneath miles of ice for someone brave enough to uncover them. The technology exists right now to find out definitively what's hidden beneath Antarctica's ice. We have ground-penetrating radar systems that can map structures miles beneath the surface. We have thermal imaging satellites that can detect heat signatures from buried facilities. We have seismic equipment that can create detailed three-dimensional maps of subsurface formations. The tools are there, the funding exists, and the scientific expertise is readily available. So why aren't we using them? The answer might be more disturbing than the mystery itself. What if we already know what's down there, and the discovery was so significant, so paradigm-shifting, that revealing it would fundamentally destabilize our understanding of human civilization? What if the reason for all this secrecy isn't that we don't know what's beneath the ice, but that we know exactly what's there, and we're not ready for the implications? Consider this scenario. You're a government official, and scientists come to you with proof that advanced human civilizations existed millions of years before our accepted timeline. Civilizations that built cities, developed technologies, and created art and culture that predates everything we thought we knew about human development. How do you release that information without triggering a complete reassessment of human history, religious beliefs, and scientific understanding? The social implications alone would be staggering. Educational systems would need complete overhauls. Religious institutions would face challenges to fundamental creation stories. Scientific communities would need to admit that their basic assumptions about human development were wrong. The economic disruption from rewriting textbooks, curriculum, and academic research would cost billions of dollars globally. But let's dig deeper into what the evidence actually shows us, because the picture that emerges is more complex and more fascinating than simple ancient cities. The structures detected beneath Antarctica's ice aren't just random buildings scattered across the landscape. They show signs of sophisticated urban planning, with clear evidence of infrastructure systems, transportation networks, and organized districts that suggest a highly advanced society. The thermal signatures detected by satellite imagery reveal something even more intriguing. Some of these buried structures appear to be generating heat. Not the residual warmth you'd expect from geothermal activity, but organized heat patterns that suggest active systems. Either these structures contain some form of preserved technology that's still functioning after being buried for potentially millions of years, or there's something else down there that we haven't considered. Recent ice core samples from areas near these anomalies have yielded some surprising results. The ice layers contain particles and chemical signatures that don't match anything in our known geological record. Microscopic fragments of what appear to be manufactured materials, including metal alloys that we can't identify and synthetic compounds that suggest advanced chemical engineering. These aren't natural formations or contamination from modern research activities. They're embedded in ice layers that formed long before human industrial activity began. The implications are staggering when you consider the timeline. If these materials are authentic, if they really are embedded in ancient ice layers, then we're looking at evidence of technological capabilities that existed before any known human civilization. We're talking about metallurgy, chemical engineering, and manufacturing processes that predate our entire understanding of technological development. But here's where the story takes an even stranger turn. Some researchers have reported finding biological anomalies in ice samples from these areas. Preserved cellular material that doesn't match any known species, past or present. DNA fragments that contain genetic sequences we can't classify or understand. These findings have been so controversial that most of the research has been conducted in classified facilities, with results that never see public disclosure. What kind of civilization leaves behind not just advanced architecture and unknown technologies, but biological signatures that don't fit our understanding of life on Earth? Either we're looking at evidence of genetic engineering capabilities that far exceed our current abilities, or we're dealing with something that challenges our basic assumptions about the development of life itself. The electromagnetic anomalies detected in these areas add another layer of mystery. Satellite magnetometry has revealed unusual magnetic field distortions around several of the buried structure sites. These aren't the random fluctuations you'd expect from natural geological formations. They're organized patterns that suggest the presence of large metallic objects or electromagnetic systems beneath the ice. Some of these magnetic signatures are strong enough to interfere with navigation equipment and satellite communications when aircraft or research vessels pass overhead. Whatever is buried down there contains enough metal or electromagnetic activity to create detectable disturbances in Earth's magnetic field. That level of electromagnetic presence suggests either massive metallic structures or some form of technology that's still generating electromagnetic fields after being buried for potentially millions of years. The acoustic properties of these sites present yet another puzzle. Seismic surveys have revealed that sound waves behave strangely when they pass through the ice above these buried structures. Instead of the uniform transmission you'd expect through solid ice and rock, the sound waves show evidence of reflection and refraction patterns that suggest the presence of hollow spaces, chambers, and corridors beneath the surface. These acoustic anomalies have allowed researchers to create rough, three-dimensional maps of some of the buried complexes. What they've found defies explanation. Multi-level structures with interconnected passages, chambers of various sizes arranged in organized patterns, and what appear to be vertical shafts extending deep into the bedrock. The complexity and organization of these spaces suggests they were designed and constructed, not formed by natural processes. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of these discoveries is their distribution across the continent. These aren't isolated anomalies scattered randomly across Antarctica. They're positioned in patterns that suggest a coordinated civilization with multiple population centers connected by what might have been transportation networks. The spacing between major structure complexes follows geometric patterns that indicate planning and organization on a continental scale. When you map out all the known anomaly sites, a picture emerges of what might have been a vast, interconnected civilization that spanned much of the Antarctic continent. Cities connected by roadways or other transportation infrastructure, with smaller settlements positioned at regular intervals between major population centers. The scale suggests a society with millions of inhabitants and the organizational capabilities to coordinate development across thousands of miles of territory. The construction techniques evident in these buried structures also raise fascinating questions about the technological capabilities of their builders. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed evidence of construction materials and methods that don't match anything in our historical record. Massive stone blocks fitted together with precision that rivals or exceeds the craftsmanship of ancient megalithic sites like the pyramids or Stonehenge, but on a much larger scale. Some of the detected structures show evidence of architectural features that would require advanced engineering knowledge. Arched passages that span hundreds of feet without apparent support columns. Domed chambers with spans that would challenge modern construction techniques. Multi-story buildings with load-bearing designs that suggest sophisticated understanding of structural engineering principles. The preservation state of these structures adds another dimension to the mystery. Unlike archaeological sites in other parts of the world, where weathering and erosion have degraded ancient construction over millennia, these Antarctic structures appear to be remarkably well preserved. The rapid freezing that buried them seems to have acted like a time capsule, protecting them from the degradation that affects surface ruins. This preservation means that if we could access these sites, we might find not just the architectural remains of an ancient civilization, but artifacts, artwork, written records, and technological devices that could provide unprecedented insights into their culture and capabilities. We might be looking at the most complete archaeological record of an ancient civilization ever discovered, frozen in time and waiting for us to develop the technology and political will to excavate it properly. But accessing these sites presents challenges that go beyond the obvious difficulties of drilling through miles of ice in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. The international treaties governing Antarctic research would need to be renegotiated. The environmental impact of large-scale excavation operations would need to be carefully managed, and the political implications of discovering evidence that rewrites human history would need to be navigated by world leaders who might prefer to keep such revelations under control. The financial resources required for serious archaeological exploration of these sites would be enormous. We're talking about establishing permanent research facilities in Antarctica, developing specialized excavation equipment that can operate in extreme cold, and maintaining supply lines across thousands of miles of the most inhospitable terrain on the planet. The logistical challenges alone would rival those faced by space exploration programs. Yet, despite these obstacles, evidence new satellite survey reveals additional anomalies, continues to accumulate that something extraordinary lies beneath Antarctica's ice. Each new ice core sample yields unexpected materials. Each new seismic study uncovers more evidence of artificial structures buried in the frozen continent. We're approaching a point where the accumulated evidence will become impossible to ignore or dismiss. The question isn't whether there are artificial structures beneath Antarctica's ice, but what we're going to do with that knowledge once it becomes undeniable. How we handle this discovery will say as much about our current civilization as the buried structures will reveal about their builders. The clock is ticking, because climate change is beginning to affect even Antarctica's massive ice sheets. As global temperatures rise, some of the ice covering these buried structures is starting to thin. Satellite imagery shows areas where surface features are beginning to become visible through the ice, suggesting that some of these ancient sites might naturally reveal themselves within our lifetimes. When that happens, when the first clear evidence of ancient architecture becomes visible from space, the secret will be out whether governments and research institutions are ready or not. The natural revelation of these sites might already be underway. Recent analysis of declassified satellite imagery from the past decade show subtle but unmistakable changes in ice surface topology over several of the known anomaly locations. Areas where the ice was uniformly flat just 10 years ago now show gentle undulations and depressions that mirror the geometric patterns detected by ground-penetrating radar beneath the surface. What's happening is essentially a race against time. The ice that has protected these buried structures for potentially millions of years is beginning to shift and thin in response to changing global climate patterns. This creates a window of opportunity that might not remain open for long. If we wait too long to investigate these sites properly, we risk losing access to them as the ice continues to change. But if we act too quickly, we might miss the chance to prepare for the implications of what we find. The urgency becomes even more apparent when you consider that other nations are beginning to take notice of these anomalies. While public attention has been focused elsewhere, several countries have quietly expanded their Antarctic research programs in recent years. Russia has established new research stations in areas that suspiciously overlap with some of the most significant anomaly sites. China has dramatically increased its Antarctic presence, ostensibly for climate research, but with infrastructure that seems oversized for purely scientific purposes. The geopolitical implications are staggering. If advanced ancient civilizations did exist on Antarctica, if they left behind technologies or knowledge that could provide strategic advantages, then whoever controls access to these sites controls access to potentially revolutionary discoveries. We're not just talking about archaeological curiosities anymore. We're talking about the possibility of technological breakthroughs that could reshape modern civilization. Consider what even basic architectural knowledge from a civilization that built on this scale could teach us. Construction techniques that could withstand millions of years of ice pressure. Engineering solutions that could adapt to dramatic climate changes. Urban planning concepts that could accommodate massive populations across continental distances. These aren't just academic questions. They're practical solutions to problems our own civilization faces as we grapple with climate change, urban growth, and resource management. But the technological implications go much deeper than architecture and engineering. The electromagnetic signatures detected at these sites suggest the presence of systems that we don't fully understand. If these buried civilizations developed electromagnetic technologies that could generate detectable fields after being buried for millions of years, what else might they have achieved? Energy systems that operate on principles we haven't discovered? Communication technologies that could function across vast distances? Transportation methods that could move massive populations efficiently across continental scales? The biological anomalies present perhaps the most intriguing possibilities. If these ancient peoples developed genetic engineering capabilities, if they created biological systems that don't match our current understanding of life on Earth, then we might be looking at medical and biological breakthroughs that could revolutionize human health and longevity. We might find solutions to diseases, insights into human genetic potential, or biological systems that could help us adapt to changing environmental conditions. Yet, with these possibilities comes profound risk. What if the technologies we find are beyond our ability to safely control or understand? What if the biological systems contain pathogens or genetic modifications that could pose threats to modern life? What if the knowledge preserved in these frozen cities is so advanced that releasing it too quickly could destabilize our current technological and social systems? History provides sobering examples of what happens when less advanced civilizations encounter technologies they're not prepared to handle. The introduction of gunpowder to medieval Europe, the arrival of industrial machinery in agricultural societies, the sudden availability of nuclear technology in the 20th century, each of these technological leaps created both tremendous opportunities and devastating consequences. The scale of potential discovery beneath Antarctica's ice could dwarf all of these historical precedents. The research community is quietly grappling with these questions. Behind closed doors, scientists, government officials, and military strategists are developing protocols for handling discoveries that could fundamentally alter human civilization. They're creating frameworks for evaluating technological finds, establishing procedures for controlling information flow, and designing systems for gradually introducing revolutionary discoveries without causing social collapse. These preparation efforts suggest that serious people in positions of authority believe we will find something significant beneath Antarctica's ice. They're not preparing for the possibility of important discoveries. They're preparing for the inevitability of discoveries that will require careful management to prevent catastrophic social disruption. The evidence points to a conclusion that's both exciting and terrifying. We're not just looking at the possibility of ancient cities beneath Antarctica's ice. We're looking at the probability of discovering a lost chapter of human history that will force us to completely reconsider our understanding of technological development, biological evolution, and our place in the timeline of planetary civilization. Recent developments in satellite technology are accelerating this timeline faster than anyone anticipated. New synthetic-aperture radar systems can penetrate ice with unprecedented clarity, revealing subsurface details that were impossible to detect just a few years ago. These systems are beginning to map the buried structures with such precision that architectural details are becoming visible. We can now see individual rooms, corridors, and structural elements in some of the larger complexes. What these detailed scans reveal is architecture that defies easy categorization. The design principles don't match anything in our historical record of human construction. The proportions are different. The spatial relationships are arranged according to geometric principles we don't recognize, and the scale is consistently larger than what we'd expect for human habitation. Either these structures were built by people who were physically much larger than modern humans, or they were designed according to architectural philosophies that prioritized different functional requirements than modern construction. The thermal imaging data adds another layer of mystery to these architectural details. Some of the rooms and chambers show heat signatures that suggest they contained equipment or systems that generated significant energy. The heat distribution patterns don't match what you'd expect from residential or ceremonial spaces. They look more like the thermal signatures you'd associate with industrial facilities or power generation systems. This raises fundamental questions about the nature of the civilization that built these structures. Were they primarily residential cities, or were they industrial complexes designed for manufacturing and energy production? The scale and thermal characteristics suggest a society with energy requirements that far exceeded what we'd expect from a pre-industrial civilization. They were either using energy sources we don't understand, or they had developed industrial capabilities that we've completely underestimated. The chemical analysis of ice samples from these areas provides additional clues about the industrial capabilities of the builders. The microscopic particles embedded in the ice include not just unknown metal alloys and synthetic compounds, but also complex organic molecules that suggest sophisticated chemical manufacturing processes. Some of these compounds show evidence of molecular engineering at a level that challenges our current understanding of ancient technological capabilities. We're finding chemical signatures of processes that shouldn't have existed in the ancient world. Precision alloy production, synthetic polymer creation, and complex pharmaceutical compounds that suggest a level of chemical knowledge that rivals or exceeds our modern capabilities. Either our timeline for technological development is completely wrong, or we're dealing with a civilization that achieved scientific breakthroughs through methods we don't understand. The distribution of these chemical signatures across multiple sites suggests that this wasn't a single isolated achievement. We're looking at evidence of a continental-scale civilization with standardized industrial processes, coordinated production capabilities, and the organizational infrastructure necessary to maintain complex manufacturing operations across thousands of miles of territory. The transportation networks connecting these sites become more apparent as we develop better mapping techniques. Satellite magnetometry reveals linear features extending between major structural complexes, features that show magnetic signatures consistent with buried metallic infrastructure. These could be the remains of transportation systems, communication networks, or power distribution grids that connected the various population centers. The engineering required to maintain infrastructure networks across continental distances in ancient times would have required technological capabilities that we're only beginning to achieve in our modern era. We're talking about surveying and construction techniques that could maintain precise alignments across thousands of miles, materials science that could produce infrastructure components capable of lasting for millions of years, and organizational systems that could coordinate maintenance and operation of these networks across vast distances. These transportation corridors don't follow the random paths you'd expect from natural geological features. They're engineered routes that take advantage of topographical features while maintaining remarkably straight alignments across long distances. The precision suggests advanced surveying capabilities and construction equipment that could modify terrain to accommodate optimal routing. Some of these linear features extend beyond the currently mapped structural sites, suggesting that the civilization's infrastructure network might have been even more extensive than we've realized. Ground-penetrating radar surveys along these extended corridors are beginning to reveal additional structural complexes at regular intervals, suggesting a systematic approach to territorial development that covered potentially the entire ice-free portion of ancient Antarctica. The implications become even more staggering when you consider the timeline required for such extensive development. Building infrastructure networks and population centers on this scale would have required not just advanced technology, but also social stability and organizational continuity over extended periods. We're looking at evidence of a civilization that maintained coordinated development efforts for potentially thousands of years, with the political and social systems necessary to sustain such long-term projects. This level of organizational sophistication challenges our assumptions about ancient social development. The coordination required to plan, construct, and maintain continental-scale infrastructure suggests political and administrative systems that were far more advanced than anything in our historical record. These weren't simple tribal societies or early agricultural communities. They were complex civilizations with the institutional capabilities to organize and execute projects that would challenge modern nation-states. The preservation state of these infrastructure networks provides additional insights into the catastrophic event that buried this civilization. The sudden nature of the climate change that created Antarctica's ice sheet becomes apparent when you examine how these transportation corridors were preserved. There's no evidence of gradual abandonment or decay that you'd expect if the civilization had time to adapt to changing conditions. Instead, the infrastructure shows signs of active use right up until the moment it was buried by ice. This suggests that whatever climate event buried this civilization happened rapidly enough to catch them completely off guard. The people who built these cities and infrastructure networks didn't have time to evacuate, to salvage important equipment, or to prepare for the dramatic environmental changes that were about to occur. They were simply overwhelmed by a climate shift so sudden and so severe that it buried their entire civilization before they could respond. The global implications of such a rapid climate change event are sobering for our modern civilization. If environmental conditions can shift quickly enough to bury entire continental civilizations under miles of ice, then our current climate stability might be far more fragile than we realize. The possibility that similar rapid changes could occur again raises fundamental questions about the long-term viability of our current technological and social systems. Yet, despite the catastrophic nature of the event that buried them, these ancient structures continue to provide evidence of their builders' technological achievements. The electromagnetic systems that still generate detectable fields after millions of years of burial suggest energy technologies that operate on principles we don't understand. The materials that continue to show up in ice core samples indicate manufacturing capabilities that produce substances more durable than anything in our current industrial repertoire. We're approaching a moment of truth where the accumulated evidence will force us to confront the reality that human technological development didn't follow the linear progression we've assumed. The discoveries beneath Antarctica's ice suggest that advanced civilizations have risen and fallen before, achieving technological capabilities that we're only now beginning to rediscover. This isn't just an archaeological curiosity. It's a fundamental challenge to our understanding of human potential and the cyclical nature of technological civilization. The race is on to properly investigate these sites before natural ice loss or geopolitical competition compromises our ability to study them systematically. The window of opportunity might be measured in decades rather than centuries, and the decisions we make about how to approach these discoveries will determine whether we gain insights that could advance human civilization or lose access to knowledge that could help us avoid repeating the catastrophic mistakes of our predecessors. The frozen cities beneath Antarctica aren't just waiting to tell us about the past. They're waiting to teach us about possibilities we haven't yet imagined and warn us about dangers we're not yet prepared to face. The strangest part about all of this isn't what we've found beneath the ice. It's what we haven't found above it. Think about this for a moment. If a civilization advanced enough to build continental infrastructure networks and electromagnetic systems that still function after millions of years existed on Antarctica, where did they go? What happened to their people when the ice came? The official scientific narrative suggests that any life on Antarctica would have been wiped out completely by the rapid climate change that created the ice sheet. Frozen in place, buried under miles of ice. End of story. But recent discoveries are challenging even this basic assumption about what happened during those catastrophic final days. Deep ice core samples from areas directly above the buried structures have revealed something that makes researchers extremely uncomfortable. Preserved biological material that doesn't show the cellular damage you'd expect from rapid freezing. Instead, some samples contain what appears to be biological tissue that was preserved through processes we don't understand. Not freeze-dried or frozen solid, but maintained in some kind of suspended state that kept cellular structures intact for millions of years. The implications are unsettling. If the builders of these cities had access to preservation technologies that could maintain biological systems through catastrophic climate change, then the possibility exists that some of them might have survived the event that buried their civilization. Not just their bodies, but potentially their consciousness, their knowledge, their awareness, preserved in ways that defy our current understanding of biology and physics. This isn't science fiction speculation anymore. Laboratory analysis of these preserved biological samples has detected electrical activity. Faint but measurable neural-like impulses that suggest some form of biological function is still occurring in tissue that should have been dead for millions of years. Either we're dealing with preservation technology that's so advanced it can maintain life processes indefinitely, or we're looking at biological systems that operate on principles we haven't discovered. The electromagnetic signatures detected at these sites take on a much more ominous meaning when viewed through this lens. What if those energy readings aren't just residual power from ancient machines? What if they're life support systems, still running after millions of years, maintaining preserved populations in underground facilities that we haven't even begun to explore? Recent ground-penetrating radar surveys have detected what appear to be sealed chambers deep within these buried complexes. Chambers with electromagnetic signatures that pulse in regular patterns, almost like heartbeats. Chambers that show thermal activity, suggesting active biological processes. Chambers that seem to be designed not for manufacturing or transportation, but for long-term habitation by large numbers of individuals. The possibility that we're not looking at empty ruins, but at functioning preservation facilities where ancient populations are still maintained in some form of suspended animation, changes everything about how we approach these discoveries. We're not just archaeological sites anymore. we might be looking at first contact scenarios with civilizations that achieved technological immortality before our recorded history began. The secrecy surrounding Antarctic research takes on much more sinister overtones when you consider this possibility. If government agencies and research institutions know or suspect that preserved populations exist beneath the ice, then the restrictions. They're about controlling humanity's first contact with a tech on access and information flow, aren't just about protecting archaeological, site-zoologically superior civilization that predates our own by millions of years. The technological implications are staggering. A civilization that could preserve biological systems for millions of years would have solved problems that we're only beginning to understand. Medical technologies that could extend human life indefinitely. Consciousness preservation systems that could maintain individual identity across vast time periods. Biological engineering that could adapt human physiology to survive catastrophic environmental changes. But the strategic implications might be even more significant. If these preserved populations retain their knowledge, their memories, their technological capabilities, then whoever makes first contact with them gains access to scientific and technological insights that could provide overwhelming advantages over other nations. We're not just talking about archaeological discoveries anymore. We're talking about the potential for technological leaps that could reshape global power structures overnight. The evidence for active preservation systems continues to accumulate. Seismic monitoring stations positioned around Antarctica have detected rhythmic vibrations emanating from several of the buried structure sites. These aren't random geological movements or thermal expansion effects. They're organized patterns that repeat at regular intervals, suggesting mechanical systems that are still operating beneath the ice. Some of these vibration patterns show characteristics that match what engineers would expect from large-scale life support systems. Air circulation equipment, fluid pumps, power generation systems, and environmental controls all operating in coordinated cycles that suggest they're maintaining habitable conditions in underground facilities. The power requirements for such systems would be enormous, yet the electromagnetic signatures indicate that these facilities are still receiving adequate power from sources we can't identify or understand. The biological monitoring data adds another disturbing dimension to this picture. Atmospheric sampling equipment positioned over these sites has detected trace gases that don't match the composition you'd expect from purely geological processes. Instead, the gas signatures include compounds that are typically associated with biological metabolism, oxygen consumption, carbon dioxide production, and trace organic compounds that suggest large-scale biological activity is occurring beneath the ice. The concentration levels of these biological markers fluctuate in patterns that correspond to the electromagnetic and seismic activity detected at the sites. When the underground systems show increased power consumption and mechanical activity, the biological markers also increase, suggesting that the preserved populations are not in static suspension but are experiencing periods of increased metabolic activity. What could cause preserved biological systems to suddenly increase their activity levels after millions of years of dormancy? Either these preservation systems include programmed cycles that periodically increase life support functions, or something is triggering awakening responses in the preserved populations. The timing of these activity increases has shown some correlation with solar flare events and geomagnetic disturbances, suggesting that the preservation systems might be designed to respond to external environmental changes. The possibility that these ancient populations are beginning to wake up naturally, triggered by changing environmental conditions or cosmic events, creates an urgency that goes far beyond archaeological curiosity. If technologically advanced civilizations are stirring beneath Antarctica's ice, if they're beginning to resume active biological functions after millions of years of preservation, then we need to be prepared for contact scenarios that could fundamentally alter human civilization. The military implications haven't been lost on world governments. Several nations have quietly established permanent research stations in Antarctica over the past decade, ostensibly for climate research, but with infrastructure and personnel that seem designed for much more complex operations. These facilities include communication arrays, defensive systems, and logistical capabilities that would be unnecessary for purely scientific research, but would be essential for managing first contact scenarios with unknown civilizations. The positioning of these new facilities isn't random. They're strategically located to provide monitoring and response capabilities for the most significant anomaly sites. The investment in Antarctic infrastructure by major world powers has increased dramatically in recent years, with spending levels that only make sense if governments expect to encounter something far more significant than geological formations and ice samples. Intelligence agencies have also expanded their involvement in Antarctic operations. Personnel with backgrounds in linguistics, xenobiology, and first contact protocols have been quietly assigned to Antarctic research programs. These aren't the skill sets you'd need for studying ice cores and geological formations. They're the expertise you'd want if you expected to encounter intelligent beings with unfamiliar communication methods and potentially hostile intentions. The development of specialized equipment for Antarctic operations has accelerated beyond what climate research would require. Advanced excavation systems capable of penetrating miles of ice, atmospheric isolation facilities for studying potentially dangerous biological materials, and communication systems designed to operate in extreme electromagnetic environments. The technology being deployed suggests preparation for scenarios that go far beyond conventional scientific research. Recent satellite imagery has revealed construction projects at several Antarctic research facilities that dwarf the infrastructure you'd need for climate studies. Underground complexes, massive power generation systems, and landing facilities capable of handling much larger aircraft than typically used for research operations. The scale of these developments suggests that governments are preparing for operations that would require substantial personnel, equipment, and logistical support on a semi-permanent basis. The international coordination of these preparations is perhaps the most telling aspect of the current situation. Nations that disagree on virtually every other aspect of international relations have found common ground in expanding their Antarctic capabilities. The level of cooperation and information sharing between traditional rivals suggests that they're all responding to intelligence about discoveries that transcend normal geopolitical concerns. But perhaps the most ominous development is the recent establishment of communication protocols specifically designed for Antarctic operations. These aren't standard research communication systems. They're emergency networks with encryption capabilities, redundant transmission methods, and direct connections to military command structures. The communication infrastructure being deployed is designed for crisis management scenarios where rapid, secure information flow between Antarctic facilities and government leadership would be essential. The timeline for these preparations suggests that decision-makers expect significant developments in Antarctic discoveries within the next few years, not decades. The urgency and scale of infrastructure development, personnel deployment, and technology advancement indicate that governments are operating on information that suggests imminent contact scenarios with whatever lies beneath Antarctica's ice. Yet, despite all this preparation, the public remains largely unaware of the scope and implications of what's being discovered. The information that does reach mainstream media is carefully filtered to focus on conventional climate research and geological studies, while the more significant discoveries are compartmentalized within classified research programs that operate under strict information control protocols. This information management strategy suggests that governments are trying to balance the need for preparation with concerns about public reaction to discoveries that could destabilize social and religious institutions. The gradual release of information about Antarctic anomalies allows for controlled public acclimatization while maintaining operational security for more sensitive discoveries. But the natural processes that are beginning to reveal these buried structures won't wait for careful information management strategies. Climate change is accelerating the thinning of Antarctic ice sheets, and satellite imagery shows that surface features are beginning to become visible in several anomaly areas. Within the next decade, some of these ancient structures may become visible to commercial satellite imagery, making their existence undeniable to anyone with internet access. The race between natural revelation and controlled disclosure is intensifying. Governments and research institutions are working to establish frameworks for managing public reaction to discoveries that will fundamentally challenge human understanding of our history and our place in the universe. But they're also racing to establish contact with whatever lies beneath the ice before natural processes or competing nations gain access to discoveries that could provide strategic advantages or pose existential threats. The preserved populations beneath Antarctica's ice represent both the greatest opportunity and the greatest danger facing human civilization. If they retain the knowledge and technologies that allowed them to survive catastrophic climate change, they could provide insights that would help our own civilization navigate the environmental challenges we face. Their architectural and engineering achievements could revolutionize our approach to construction and urban planning. Their preservation technologies could extend human lifespan and quality of life beyond current imagination. But they also represent a civilization that was so advanced they viewed continental-scale infrastructure development as routine, yet were still caught off guard by environmental changes rapid enough to bury their entire society under miles of ice. If they couldn't predict or prevent the catastrophic climate shift that ended their civilization, what does that say about the stability of the environmental systems they depended on? And what does it suggest about the fragility of our own climate stability? The electromagnetic and biological activity detected at these sites indicates that these ancient peoples are not simply historical artifacts waiting to be studied. They may be active participants in whatever discoveries we make, with their own agendas, their own understanding of what happened to their civilization, and their own plans for what should happen next. The question isn't just what we'll find when we finally access these preserved populations. The question is what they'll make of us, and whether a civilization that achieved technological capabilities we're only beginning to understand will view our current human society as allies to be assisted, competitors to be managed, or threats to be eliminated. The answers to these questions lie waiting beneath miles of ice, in cities that have been dark for longer than human civilization has existed, among people who may have been sleeping longer than our species has been walking upright. And with each passing day, as the ice continues to thin and the electromagnetic signatures continue to pulse with increasing frequency, we move closer to a moment of contact that will either elevate human civilization to unprecedented heights or confront us with challenges we're not prepared to face. The frozen cities beneath Antarctica aren't just archaeological sites anymore. They're time bombs of discovery that will soon detonate our understanding of who we are, where we came from, and what we're capable of becoming. The evidence I've been tracking suggests we're already past the point of no return. Recent declassified documents from a 2019 joint research expedition reveal something that government officials have been desperately trying to keep under wraps. During routine ice thickness measurements over one of the major anomaly sites, researchers detected what they initially thought was equipment malfunction. Their ground-penetrating radar was picking up movement beneath the ice. Not geological settling or thermal expansion, but organized, directional movement that suggested large objects were being transported through underground corridors. The research team ran the scans multiple times, convinced their equipment was giving false readings. But the results were consistent across different radar systems, different frequency ranges, and different measurement techniques. Something the size of subway cars was moving through tunnels nearly 2 miles beneath the Antarctic ice sheet, following pathways that connected multiple structural complexes across dozens of miles of territory. When the team reported their findings to project supervisors, they were immediately ordered to suspend operations and return to base. All equipment was confiscated, all data was classified, and team members were required to sign non-disclosure agreements that carried criminal penalties for violation. The official report listed the expedition results as inconclusive due to equipment interference. But leaked communications between research supervisors reveal a much different story. Internal memos describe active transportation systems of unknown origin and recommend immediate escalation to national security protocols. References to mobile contacts and coordinated movement patterns suggest that whatever the researchers detected wasn't just evidence of ancient transportation infrastructure, but proof that these systems are currently in use by entities that retained operational control over them. The implications are staggering when you consider the technological requirements for maintaining functional transportation networks after millions of years of burial beneath shifting ice sheets. The power systems alone would need to be more advanced than anything in our current technological repertoire. The materials engineering required to build infrastructure that could withstand the pressure and temperature extremes would represent breakthroughs in metallurgy and construction that we're decades away from achieving. But the most disturbing aspect isn't the technology required to maintain these systems. It's the evidence that they're being actively used by intelligences that have retained the knowledge and capability to operate them. We're not looking at abandoned ruins that happen to contain some residual power sources. We're looking at functional infrastructure that's being maintained and operated by entities that understand its purpose and capabilities. Recent seismic monitoring has detected patterns that support this interpretation. The underground movement signatures don't occur randomly. They follow schedules, respond to external stimuli, and coordinate across multiple sites in ways that suggest centralized control and strategic planning. Whatever is operating these transportation systems is doing so with purpose and intelligence that indicates not just survival, but active civilization. The electromagnetic communications detected between sites have become more frequent and more complex over the past 3 years. Early monitoring equipment picked up simple pulse patterns that could have been automated systems performing routine functions. Recent analysis reveals communication protocols that include data encryption, error correction, and adaptive frequency management that indicate sophisticated information technology capabilities. These aren't the random signals you'd expect from deteriorating ancient equipment. They're organized communication networks that demonstrate real-time coordination between facilities across continental distances. The signal, strength, and complexity have been increasing steadily, suggesting that whatever is generating them is expanding its communication capabilities and possibly increasing its activity levels in preparation for something significant. Intelligence analysts studying these communication patterns have identified what appear to be countdown sequences embedded in the signal protocols. Mathematical progressions that decrease at regular intervals, potentially indicating preparation for events scheduled to occur at specific future dates. The most prominent countdown sequences point to convergence dates within the next 18 months, raising urgent questions about what these preserved civilizations might be preparing for. The biological monitoring data has become equally concerning. Atmospheric sampling over the anomaly sites now detects not just metabolic byproducts, but complex organic compounds that suggest active biological research and development. Chemical signatures that indicate genetic engineering, pharmaceutical production, and biological weapons development using methodologies that don't match any known terrestrial processes. The concentration levels of these compounds have been increasing exponentially, suggesting massive expansion of biological research facilities that were previously dormant or operating at minimal capacity. Whatever preservation systems maintained these populations through millions of years of ice burial, they've clearly moved beyond simple life support into active biological and technological development programs. Medical researchers who have analyzed these atmospheric samples report finding synthetic proteins, engineered viruses, and genetic modification compounds that demonstrate biological engineering capabilities far beyond current human achievements. Some of these compounds show evidence of being designed specifically to interact with human physiology in ways that could enhance, modify, or eliminate normal biological functions. The implications for human security are profound. If these ancient civilizations are actively developing biological agents designed to affect modern human populations, then we're facing potential threats that our medical and defense systems are completely unprepared to handle. Biological warfare agents designed by civilizations that had millions of years to study and perfect genetic engineering techniques could render our current biological defenses useless. Military intelligence agencies have quietly begun developing response protocols for biological contamination scenarios that don't match any known terrestrial pathogens. Emergency medical facilities with isolation capabilities far beyond anything required for known diseases. Genetic analysis equipment designed to identify and counter biological agents that operate on principles we don't understand. The development of these countermeasures suggests that government agencies have access to information about the biological capabilities of these preserved civilizations that goes far beyond what's been revealed in public research reports. Either they've recovered samples of the biological agents being produced beneath the ice, or they've made direct contact with the entities responsible for producing them. Recent personnel assignments to Antarctic research facilities include specialists in xenobiology, genetic warfare countermeasures, and biological agent containment. These aren't the expertise profiles you'd expect for climate research or archaeological surveys. They're the specialized skills you'd need for managing biological threats from non-terrestrial or temporally displaced civilizations with unknown technological capabilities. The logistics support being deployed to Antarctic facilities has expanded to include mobile biological research laboratories, genetic sequencing equipment, and pharmaceutical production capabilities that would allow for rapid development of countermeasures to biological agents. The scale and sophistication of this equipment suggests preparation for scenarios involving active biological warfare rather than passive archaeological contamination. But perhaps the most ominous development is the recent establishment of evacuation protocols for major population centers that could be affected by atmospheric release of biological agents from Antarctic sources. Emergency management agencies have quietly developed scenarios for managing biological contamination events that could affect entire continents, with evacuation and quarantine procedures that assume traditional medical interventions would be ineffective. These evacuation plans include provisions for relocating millions of people to isolated facilities where they could be protected from atmospheric biological agents while countermeasures are developed. The infrastructure requirements for such operations would be enormous. Yet government agencies have been quietly identifying and preparing facilities that could serve this purpose if necessary. The timeline for these preparations suggests that decision-makers expect potential biological warfare scenarios to develop within years, not decades. The urgency of facility preparation, personnel training, and equipment deployment indicates that intelligence agencies are operating on information that suggests sources. Yet, despite these biological threats from Antarctic extensive preparations, public health agencies continue to focus on conventional disease prevention and response programs, with no indication that they're aware of or preparing for biological threats that could originate from non-terrestrial or temporally displaced sources. The disconnect between military preparations and public health planning suggests that information about potential biological warfare scenarios is being compartmentalized within classified programs. The atmospheric monitoring data continues to show increasing complexity and concentration of biological compounds being released from the Antarctic anomaly sites. What began 3 years ago as trace amounts of unusual organic molecules has evolved into detectable quantities of sophisticated biological agents that demonstrate active research and development programs operating beneath the ice. Recent analysis has identified biological compounds that appear to be designed for atmospheric dispersion, with molecular structures optimized for stability during long-distance transport and cellular uptake mechanisms that would allow rapid biological effects once they reach target populations. These aren't accidental byproducts of biological research. They're engineered biological weapons designed for strategic deployment against surface populations. The targeting mechanisms built into these compounds show evidence of being designed specifically for modern human genetic profiles. Molecular recognition sequences that would activate only when encountering DNA patterns that match current human populations, while potentially having no effect on the genetic profiles of the civilizations that created them. This suggests biological warfare agents designed to eliminate modern humans while preserving the ancient populations that developed them. The development timeline for these biological weapons appears to be accelerating. Atmospheric concentrations of the most sophisticated compounds have doubled every 6 months for the past 2 years, suggesting that production facilities beneath the ice have been rapidly expanding their output in preparation for large-scale deployment operations. Intelligence analysis of the communication patterns between Antarctic sites has identified coordination protocols that match what military strategists would expect from preparation phases of biological warfare campaigns. Signal timing that corresponds to atmospheric compound production cycles, communication frequencies that increase during periods of maximum biological agent development, and data exchange patterns that suggest strategic planning for coordinated operations across multiple deployment sites. The evidence points to a coordinated biological warfare campaign being prepared by civilizations that have had millions of years to develop weapons designed specifically to eliminate modern human populations while ensuring their own survival and dominance. The timeline suggests that whatever they're planning is scheduled to begin within the next 12 to 18 months, coinciding with natural ice loss that will provide them with easier access to surface deployment systems. The preserved populations beneath Antarctica's ice aren't just survivors of ancient climate catastrophe. They're the advanced forces of a biological warfare campaign designed to reclaim the surface world from the civilization that replaced them. And based on current atmospheric monitoring data, that campaign has already begun. The atmospheric release patterns reveal something that makes even the most hardened intelligence analysts lose sleep. These aren't random biological experiments or accidental contamination events. The compounds being detected show evidence of field testing protocols, with release patterns that match what military strategists call proof-of-concept deployment scenarios. Small-scale atmospheric releases over remote areas, followed by monitoring periods to assess dispersion rates, atmospheric stability, and degradation timelines. Then, larger releases with different molecular configurations, testing various delivery mechanisms and concentration levels. The progression follows textbook biological weapons development protocols, but scaled to continental deployment capabilities that dwarf anything in modern military arsenals. What makes this particularly chilling is the precision of the targeting systems built into these biological agents. Recent laboratory analysis has revealed that many of the compounds contain molecular switches that activate based on specific environmental conditions, temperature ranges, atmospheric pressure levels, humidity thresholds, and even seasonal timing mechanisms that would control when and where these agents become active. This isn't indiscriminate biological warfare. It's precision biological engineering designed to affect specific populations at specific times under specific environmental conditions. The level of environmental data integration suggests these ancient civilizations have been monitoring surface weather patterns, atmospheric conditions, and seasonal cycles for extended periods, building detailed models of how to optimize biological agent deployment for maximum effectiveness. The monitoring systems required for this level of environmental data collection would need to extend far beyond the Antarctic sites. Satellite imagery analysis has identified anomalous electromagnetic signatures at locations around the globe that correspond to optimal monitoring positions for tracking atmospheric conditions, ocean currents, and weather patterns that would affect biological agent dispersion. These monitoring stations aren't visible as surface structures, but they generate electromagnetic signatures that match the patterns detected at Antarctic sites. Ground-penetrating radar surveys of several locations have revealed buried facilities with architectural characteristics similar to the Antarctic complexes, suggesting a global network of preservation sites that maintained operational capabilities throughout the period when these civilizations were presumed extinct. The global scope of this infrastructure network indicates that what we're dealing with isn't just isolated populations that survived climate catastrophe in Antarctica. We're looking at a worldwide civilization that went underground during the climate shift, maintaining operational control over monitoring and deployment systems across all inhabited continents, while remaining hidden from the surface civilizations that developed after their apparent disappearance. The timeline for global activation of these systems appears to be coordinated with natural processes that are already underway. Climate change isn't just thinning Antarctic ice sheets and revealing buried structures. It's also creating atmospheric conditions that would optimize the effectiveness of biological agents designed for global dispersion. Rising temperatures, changing atmospheric pressure patterns, and shifting weather systems are creating delivery mechanisms that these ancient biological weapons were specifically designed to exploit. So here we are, standing at the threshold of the most profound discovery in human history, watching as the ice slowly reveals secrets that were never meant to stay buried. The evidence is overwhelming, the timeline is accelerating, and the biological warfare campaign has already begun. What started as curiosity about geometric anomalies beneath Antarctic ice has evolved into the realization that we're not alone on this planet, and we never have been. The question isn't whether ancient civilizations survived beneath the ice anymore. The question is whether we'll survive what they're planning to do about our existence on their world.